继续 Braid 时空幻境的周年重制版，这 commentary 也算来到尾声了。上一期那块拼图花了很久，现在显然另外一块拼图的那个地方已经很明确了。这个谜题我觉得能进那个门是比较难，但进去后反而没啥了。来，把那个 Word 23456的这个 commentary 给它扫完，从底下开始看。The general feel of the brush strokes， 这难度居然分开了 brush strokes。
This is a great place to look at the or one brush style on tour or no. Isn't the entire theme? I don't know what main stroke. Maybe you need to get a really big teeth.
The little monster guy.
The design of the basic monster character was definitely influenced by John's original. Like it's not being with the shape I came up with. It's kind of feathery, so they're kind of feathery shapes. I think it was just like a furry, feathery thing that appealed to me.
Concrete blocks. Oh, 这儿
These blocks here are funny to me because they come from very early in development, and I made a couple of bricks that they're kind of high detail and kind of a funny shape, but they don't show up a whole lot and they don't really blend in with the other things here. They're kind of unique and weird, like these concrete painted things that are kind of smashed up or decayed or something.
And there's like some kind of sheet or something on it. Like what do you think that is?
A sheet?
Like this sort of reddish hued thing that's on the concrete block.
I think the top of the block is just painted red to help it stand out as a surface. I don't know. They're like highly detailed painted things that are, I don't know, it just reminds me of sitting there painting something in a lot of detail, not knowing what it would go with. Actually, somebody wrote to me a while ago, and unfortunately don't remember his name, but he was really interested in Braid and doing all this research and like analyzing it in incredible depth. And he had a lot of developed thoughts about these blocks.
Interesting. But in reality, you just kind of
lazy.
You just painted too much until you were satisfied.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm painting something like that, it's coming from somewhere, and I'm making shapes that are interesting to me. And that's great if people find something in it. I mean, that's the whole point. But it was definitely a case where what he'd found was far more developed and interesting than whatever I was conscious of.
The cloud cannon.
Did you control?
We were intuitive loop.
这果然就是他。
That cannon will fire again. So, yeah, it was just like kind of an elegant solution.
As a former producer, I very much appreciate the recycling of concepts.
Yeah.
An additional note from John about the clouds. 想起来
It's worth going into the implement
from John.
norm the place when Dave, since we all of clouds has merely one cloud cannon on the left-hand side.
About parallax. An additional note from John about the depth value fiasco. Sorry, David.
What is parallax? If you're
Parallax primer 就讲过了。
and you
Parallax
when
primer.
I'm universal and like
is that for all the stuff to work that way.
Got it.
But yeah, there it did get to a point that I dug myself into enough of a hole I had to make a spreadsheet.
Parallax 视差
All this hassle David is
Hassle.
rate is that we wanted very rate, like a whiff same rate, have a bunch of extra planning that apparently involved spreadsheets. Sorry, David. My bad.
Adding scenery around the puzzle frames. 这个
So far, a lot of the upgrades have been these sort of
这个已经很早就看过了。
adding, attending, deference to organically ups of like completely changing how like
当时还在看 design 的时候就已经
looks
听到这个
and it's just kind of silly and pointless.
那会儿基本上算 John 的专场，所以突然听到这个相对嫩的声音，还觉得有点不习惯。The World 2 Castle, that Plant Master, the Big Climb, Plant Master。这个是吧？这个没看过。
This part also got a lot of attention, and
这个
that's
看过
to backlog now of or like part. The
再来
real
Shit my
the
boots.
your space, right? But I think I or light shadows or like particles behind the foreground along its edge, so that it just stands out better.
Sure.
Well, this guy is called the Claw,
The claw.
but it's a plant. Another one that looks a lot like Edmund's design, especially in the eye. I think you can really see it. But really, it's Edmund's character that I repainted with not a lot of
哦，还真的有
changes.
眼睛呢。
And
我才发现。
he's kind of another like classic throwbacky character that you might consider familiar.
马里奥食人花了。啊，真的有眼睛啊。
Similarly to framing the puzzles.
Framing the
There's
castles.
an idea, any really different castle here, like necessarily feudalism.
Feudalism
or
就是封建主义。
associate with like the construction of castles, but
这
it's
些
like
基本都是看过的，
something
所以我就简
beautiful
单过一遍。
to aspire to. That his search would bring him to something transcendent.
Transcendent， 简单的过一遍。The big pit， 啊，这儿
But I like this part. I like falling. He land up
But no.
tomb of don't have any kind of acknowledgement of the fall.
Hunt， 原来如此。
I like how the background now is like a single painting. That's something those pieces your brush. It's the image in which the walls are top HUD is uniquely drawn, as are the X's that cover them as you murder them.
You're crazy.
Really? Wow. You're crazy.
John told me to do that.
Sure. That dinosaur. 哦，对，这个还没想过。Dinosaur.
The dinosaur is another creature created by Edmund Macmillan. I feel it's very much.
哎，
his
这名
design.
怎么念
It's a very good
？Ed-
one. Dinosaur is
Edmund
dinosaur is
Macmillan.
another creature created by Edmund Macmillan. I feel
Macmillan.
it's very much his design, and it's a very good one.
不是 Macmillan 吗
I think I did the animations because I found different versions of the animations that I'd clearly done. So either I was testing alternatives or I did all his animations. Or maybe Edmund did the idol and I did the walk or the talk. I'm not sure.
？OK，
But the design is certainly Edmund's. I did try like variations on this guy, giving him a vest and other stuff like or a beard, but the simpler approach worked the best. He's clearly like a stuffed animal dinosaur.
Stuffed animal dinosaur. Sure， 下一个。啊，这里没看过的很多是吧？先把顶上的看了，关上。Making a 2D object seem more 3D， 这个应该是没看过。
Here's a level where we didn't try to reinvent the wheel. We just took the existing artwork and broke it down into a lot more layers.
这谁啊
As you walk back and forth, you can see a tree that would have been a single cutout now is maybe 4 to 9 different pieces
Yeah.
scrolling at slightly different speeds. So it gives it a lot more depth and a lot more subtlety.
Sure. Breaking the background into more pieces. 哦，它会重置的。
I remember doing the level after the. Towards the end of the level after the last spike pit is broken into a lot more parallax layers. As you go back and forth, it has a enhanced sense of depth.
The gradual change in atmosphere in the game's longest level. 啊，这个
This is the longest attacked by flex, and there's
Being more increased on this area as well,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, there's a lot of rain, and in fact, there's a second type of rain, which is kind of a big falling sheet.
big rocks with multiple parts.
So the more objects we have, the richer the scene feels. But then a really large thing like the rock begins to feel flat if it's not parallaxing. It's
这个
you
是
know doesn't
rock.
necessarily look like it has to have a lot of like Z depth that you would visually see as parallaxing, but it does come towards you to some degree. So if I didn't break it up into pieces, it would feel flat. And then there's the issue of, you know, how many pieces does it need to be? Just 2? Well, now it looks like a rock with 2 parts to it, but that's not what this is. It's not a rock with a front part and a back part. It is really just one part visually. So the only way to really like convincingly make it parallax is to break it into enough subdivisions that you kind of don't notice how many there are. So there are probably like 4 or 5 different parts.
哦，这石头是这么设计。这个石头的话都还是有点意思。不说你还真没法发现。靠，死。Creating an impression on this level. Irreversal. Shit,
There's
my
this
boots.
bright red bush that's kind of like an explosion where the fireball hits the ground. Here we have another puzzle area and an opportunity to add some new scenery. I guess I just always like big hollow trees. And you're about to go underground. So it seemed like a good chance to have a more interesting entrance to the underground. Hopefully it feels like you're going into the tree and following its roots down below. This tree has a lot of parallax going on in the branches. This is also a case where we've improved the contrast and foreground background clarity a lot by darkening the foreground and lightening the background and helping to define the ground plane with the mist.
The boss and his home.
So this character you fight in armor and
Mine.
are that you're on.
Sto-
The idea of a boss.
with maybe is that
Yeah.
dying on his victims,
I think so. I think he savors it.
and he collects antique armor.
Yeah. And hero shields.
A better tree.
The upgrade here is all about improving the con stage, the chance to make it really feel like a tree, like a hollow tree with roots going down. And yeah, I feel it hangs together a lot better. So to me, that's like was kind of crying out for improvement.
The revised environment at the end of World 3.
So this is one of the first areas with one at one particular position back there between the trees. Parallax is in and out of view, and in fact, sometimes there's a particle covering it up. There just was.
World 3's visuals. The graphical effect on unrewindable objects. What the World 3 forest. 哇塞，直接3连。
So World 2 was sort of green and idyllic. So
Idyllic.
World 2, you're
Which is the first human structure you see. Well, they're trellises, but there'll be more as the thing progresses.
Hey.
More things made out of wood, which is comes from the forest. So it's just a small step towards like artificiality, I guess.
Were there any iterations on how you visualized elements like this key in the door that aren't affected by time?
The rewind exempt effect.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the rewind exempt effect you see on the key on the door in the original, I don't know that I had any influence on it. I don't remember anyway. I think it's pretty simple. On the one hand, like you have these little dots that are kind of roaming around, and I think that was John's effect that just stayed in there. There's also a rippling effect around it, like a distortion map or something. I think Sean Barrett worked on that. I know he did some effects kind of late in development.
But there was some remastering of it?
Yeah, in the remaster, we did revisit these effects, and you know, I know I drew and prototyped some like larger divergences, but stuck with something that was still green and still kind of roaming around the surface, not too different. But now they're these kind of chunky particles that are like shrinking down, so it's a little more interesting. One other thing about the vibe of this world, as we're taking one step towards danger, it is the idea of like the implications of Tim messing around with the rules of nature beginning to have maybe troubling, disconcerting, slightly dangerous consequences. Just opening the door to that a little bit. We didn't want to go too far. I wanted to create a sense of like
引入群羊一次看过，
there was the sense of danger.
再来一遍。嘿，
I wanted to press work on what step like it's the intention idea of magic and kind of breaking the regular laws of the world, opening a door to something unknown, maybe dangerous.
Trellises，这个没看
The
过。
trellises are a common feature. In the HD version, we added more variation across them, so there's like a secondary texture that has a lot of moss on it, and we use kind of mask effect to say when that second texture should show through, so you can create an irregular mossy effect. That was something I think John brought forward, that he wanted to break up the monotony or the repetition on the trellises.
哦，懂了懂了，否则看起来都一样。The background of Phase was rearranged substantially.
This is probably the best example of a visual upgrade
Hey.
that maybe errs towards like not better, just different. I mean, I like what we have here. It wouldn't be in the game if I didn't like it. But in general, as I've described, we try to not change things unless there's a very like specific purpose or it was maybe a bit empty before. And in this case, I think there's like a little bit of friction between the two versions now. They kind of have a little bit of a different feeling. It's actually relatively subtle. I'm not sure I can characterize the difference exactly, but I do feel it's kind of more enveloping and enclosed in the new version. So
do you feel like you might have swung too far on this one, or are you're pretty pleased with it?
you know, right now I'm pleased with it. But my opinion through most of development was
Too
was
bright.
a little bit questionable to replace this artwork. We were pretty conservative overall.
Well, okay. Any significance to the rain?
Each world has a weather effect. Here it's rain. And
Oh, okay.
That's very useful for highlighting when you're rewinding, because of course seeing things fall up into the sky
Oh.
tells you very clearly and loudly that you're subverting the rules of nature. Things are going backwards, and in each world it's also a chance to enhance the atmosphere. There's that Japanese saying about foxes have their weddings when the sun is out and it's raining. So there's something magical about rain on a sunny day. I guess it seems contradictory, though it does happen.
这个是个谚语是吗？日本的谚语，对狐狸、天晴、下雨是有关系，说不出来，但见过。4个。The pit again.
The pit change greater sense of coldness and distance.
Distance.
The background is further away. It's all blue. It's cloudy and austere.
Austere. Animated sky and clouds.
I feel this is a good world foreground rock. And
Here you
shadow.
use brush strokes.
Curly clouds in the new one.
Yeah, the curly clouds were a staple of the original version, and now they're brought to life. More animation,
Commentary
more,
as control.
subdivision, and everything.
A visual upgrade to another puzzle area. 啊，这
Well, here's another childhood timeline way. The fact of their height. You know, rocket ships fly. Makes you think about how could you be as tall as a...
Eyeball up toward your, being nice.
Is he ready to wield this power?
right.
I don't know.
Stay tuned, folks.
A redesigned castle.
Yeah, this is the one. It's in the first days.
Mass.
So yeah, we've been more, but I like this a lot. I'm actually happy with that. The cassette is just built from particle systems, like very normal particle systems, and I just figured out how to make it look like it was running.
The ideas behind World 5's visuals.
World 5 is about a choice and about a crossroads.
这好像没怎么
What
听
would
过。
happen
啊，看看
given for like up here or the mast of a ship, and yet you've got like big into a swamp that are combined with like nautical motifs as well. Large wooden columns you might see on a pier or the mast of a ship, and yet you've got like big comfy duvets and pillows and things like that. So there's a contradiction here, and we get to see the confused intersection of these two possible futures, I guess.
Japanese-inspired architecture. 哪有？
I like this level. I feel like good about the upgrades here. It's another case where the background helps to subdivide the space and create a sense of inside, outside, above, and below that wasn't as strong before.
Now, in the remake, you have some kind of Japanese-inspired architecture. Did that come from your own life?
Yes. I actually grew up in a house that had like Japanese influenced architecture, and there are actually a lot of things throughout the game that are taken from my parents' house, where I was living when I started to work on it. I had finished art school, I'd moved back home, and for about the first half of the project before I moved to the Bay Area, I was working for my parents' home. So there's like random things here and there that are taken from there. Yeah, we had a house that had like sort of sliding screens in front of the windows in certain rooms.
Are the rugs also?
I think that zigzag pillow in the middle the colorful zigzags is literally a pillow my parents had. And the rugs, yeah, they had some kind of Persian style rugs as well.
Enhancing World 5's puzzle area.
This area is well way to go
Identified
visual
early
cues
on.
that I could pick up on, like these drapes, or I think of it as kind of a rolled up sail, but also drapes. It's a bit confused, but it kind of functions both ways. I could extend that motif into these hanging drapes in the background.
Constriction in World 5's art.
I like the hearth. I think it really
Half.
really but I guess this is the fantasy world, so the size is a bit mixed up.
然后就不知道 gallery 是有多长了嘛，这是应该搞不定。World 5 Castle。啊，这个
The
stained
early
glass.
versions of this kind of
Messed up looking.
you know, there's two popsicle sticks.
I haven't seen
Bring
those
it
in a
in.
long time.
Neither by.
That's probably still a thing.
Yeah, it also looks like the Ten Commandments, which Moses broke in half, actually.
这个其实是圣经里面的东西。啊，这边果然是一层一层。那从底下来，啊，其实是一样的。顶上不能下来，所以其实是一样的。那刚刚是杂草了什么？对，先照看。The new fog particles, the new graphics for the slowdown ring，两个哦。
The first thing that jumps out to me, style prominent.
And the flames.
Yeah, there's the flames have this sort of color cycling. I guess they're just like generating particles with more like hue variance, so it's jittering the color around, and it also is casting on the fog, so it's like a nice combination. The slowdown ring is the central like for all, but so I don't know if and it just has more differentiated parts that behave differently.
马上就要结束了，就可以回去看 gallery 了。啊，拼图当然留到最后，这里看过了，一共还有6个。The new palette for World 6.
So World 6 doesn't have the most changed palette blue, which was like a
Because we're in the thick.
kind of like lounge,
Lounge.
with like low
Slinky.
lights and kind of
Slinky.
like a slinky atmosphere or
Actually,
something like that.
Sure. Some World 6 background art.
I guess there's sort of a carnival
Carnival
thing with
aspect.
parallaxes. So
啊，对，这个
chamber
有印
that,
象。
feeling that it's like watching you or tracking you a little bit. It's a subtle effect.
Subtle effect. Some World 6 background architecture. Phase.
I like this building facade here to the right of the track.
Ah.
Like the world. Actually, it's in a sense because I like to work that way, but it's also referencing the organic stuff earlier in the game and trying to draw contrast.
嗯哼。上顶上还有3个，其实是1个了。World 6 costumes.
This is when we're first starting to see beyond the wedding dress anyway. These costumes.
啊，顶上这个
You said these costumes were sort of representing maybe like
social
roles
roles.
one could play.
Yeah. I mean, I think Tim is feeling uncomfortable in his skin or feeling like there's something he has to consciously put on to interact with people. So it's a kind of studied affect maybe, or, you know, just learning mechanically how to interact with people. And so if you're a mailman or an astronaut or whatever, it's kind of a script you run.
So Tim is feeling that he can't fit a mold, I guess. That maybe it's easier for other people because they have sort of assigned roles, right?
Yeah, I think as Tim explores more and more his powers, he becomes kind of less at home with other people. Kind of reveals how
Special he is.
arbitrary a lot of the structures are. So it's kind of hard to feel at home with the symbols and the roles that you typically encounter. It's a little bit speculative.
这期应该第20期是吧？13+3+1+1+2，对，第20期。就不清楚 gallery 有多长，但怎么说应该再加1-2期能搞定。More background art,
Over here on the right side of this sheet,
unique
top
background
panel,
music.
that works too.
Also seeing pawn, they look like rooks.
They look like rooks.
The new graphics for the World 6 castle and its surroundings.
Okay, so you add.
It's the lot, just like the with a plaque, kind of for observation
exposed。
by others, exposed.
OK， 没了。Gallery， 拼图可以先拿到，然后拼嘛，当然最后拼。但拼上了，这游戏是真正要收官了啊！它这么一点过去了，这里有多少东西看过来？我估计啊，呀，这边很多出来的绿色，确实绿色。诶，但进去还会有吗？好，好，它这个排布还真有点神奇。这些可以先把这片拿掉吧。Double barrel， 哇哦，我操！我去，那跳起来不行吗？跳不到啊！还有一只怪是吧？那个是绿的，不受时间影响。这个炮也是不受时间影响。就这样是吧？就可以了。这个倒很简单。啊，这个难度告诉你有6是吧？这个相当简单，像跟没事，这再走一圈就行。这个跟上一期的比简单太多了。那个可能是我觉得最难的一块拼图了。从思路到这个 execution 应该最难的一块。这个是4还是5？那么反正不是3也不是6，就没了，结束了。简单轻松的结束了。啊，这个是 Attic 的 World 1。好，然后每个地方都有一个这个原画的
concept. This is a concept.
对，这看过的。
World 1.
Final Confrontation 看过的。
Has a spice. This is trying to put some of that in getting larger.
Like, you know, when you're driving on a road and all you see is like maybe a garage.
那个确实不是蒙娜丽莎，那个就是 LHOOQ。
Which I've only seen in the Bay Area.
感兴趣的搜一下这个 LHOOQ 就行。其实是一个以蒙娜丽莎为模板恶搞的这么一部作品，但是它仍然是一部作品啊。这也看过，看过的全部看了。啊，但问题这个啊，嗨，そういうやられか，能跳下去吗？啊，可以跳下去，连在一起是吧？Companion， 紧张，这个是什么 ？Companion。哦，本来还想设计一个 Companion 是吧 ？A B C D E F， 后面几个倒挺像的。D E F 啊，也不算完全一样。头上那个什么竹蜻蜓啊、螺旋桨，还有这个裙子是吧？这不太一样。Companion， 我操，后面是把这个想法废除掉了。你不觉得这只 Companion 太大了吗？不是很懂了。Companion， 来。
On April 1st, you announced a new feature.
On April 1st, we announced a new feature. That's a companion creature, sort of a chaperone character like Navi from Zelda. And
Navi.
This is a character called Bloopy.
Bloopy.
And he's very friendly. He's got a propeller on his head. He can appear at any time, and just if you're stumped at all, then he can, get you past that discomfort. You're not here for that. You want to be entertained. So, as the game progresses, Bloopy remains by your side, but he does age. He does show the wear and tear on his body, on his face, and he does begin to sag over time, and eventually he will die, and then Tim is alone again.
啊，这个是个墓碑是吧？啊，怪不得，这是 grave。Sad fuck 啊。OK， 这边就能看多少看多少了。哎，暂时不进去的话你也估计不了多少量。Commentaries about visual art often contain many images, so we provide a gallery mode that allows you to browse those images at your own pace. 所以它给了你一个这个 gallery mode， 没有给你一个这个 soundtrack mode。
Well, this is the beginning of the whole project for me. John was looking for an artist to add art to his game, Braid, which was already totally functional and kind of fully designed end to end, although it would change more over time.
OK，
He was auditioning a lot of artists and sent screenshots of the stripped down programmer art, and my task was to paint over and decide what this might look like. I don't remember what direction he gave me at this point in time. Probably one of the first things he would have asked for is a very clear differentiation between foreground and background, because I remember that was a strong motif throughout. To me, it's really cool to see how wide open it was at this point. We have like a crystalline cave type of setting, kind of reminds me of Yoshi's Island. Then there's a sort of jungly stage. This one's interesting because it has silhouetted figures dancing. It reminds me of the beginning of Mulholland Drive, the credit sequence. But this is a kind of collage approach that I didn't use in Braid, but I'm kind of using a little bit now in my current project, in a sense.
I'm kind of getting Shadow of the Colossus out of this other one.
Oh yeah, the ruins.
Yeah.
Yeah, ruins and kind of misty hills. Yeah, it does have a Shadow of the Colossus atmosphere. I think the most interesting ones to me are the ones with the kind of pastel-like abstract backgrounds. They're probably abstract, but you know, I still read them as physical spaces.
OK，
Are these buildings? Are these stylized hills? I don't know, but there's a hazy atmosphere. There's light back there. There are free floating color splotches, bright saturated colors, and those are things that would end up in Braid, in spirit at least, in some form.
I find the last one interesting because,
With the autumn leaves?
yeah, because moving autumn leaves were actually in John's programmer art. So this is something you might have observed somewhere in a
啊，
build,
那个是
maybe.
John 的版本，
Definitely. I mean, I'm definitely at this point influenced by what I saw of the game.
怪不得小人这
John
么猥
had
琐
put。falling leaves and other atmospheric elements already into the game. And there was actually some artwork done before me by, I don't know the names, but there was an art firm hired to do the art, which became unavailable, which is why John was looking again. But there was some art in there that was a kind of storybook illustration style, very different from what I ultimately did, but I think some of the flavor influenced me somehow, because that was my kind of total sense of what the flavor of the game was all these elements that were already present.
OK， 这 team 怎么这么与众不同啊？啊，底下是封死什么 ？Sunset and House， 这肯定看过了啊。这里居然有哦，所以这里每一个禁区都有 gallery，
I'm looking at the original.
这看过的。
See here.
2分
So
60
I'm
秒。
thinking the bridge can explain, and then the game with a purple, like a night sky, like after the sunset.
After Sunset， 啊，这看过了就简单非常快的扫一下。有2个门是吧？哦，这里还有一个。这个是 House 对。
Does include you access the final, and there are no walls assembled. It's running between them, which looks very witnessy actually.
Witnessing， 很像 witness， 所以叫 witnessing。啊，那个是 the cloud 是吧？你这个为什么？哦，这里还有个门呢。哇，你好狗啊！你这谁设计出来的游戏啊 ？You know this is just absolutely shit design。好，总算点到了。这个是 absolutely shit design， 没有任何可以争议的范围的。你像这个是能碰到，这个是能碰到，这两个完全叠在一起了，对吧？我没有说错吧 ？The clouds， 你这个设计 is just garbage，you know。It's not good.
So this is a moment original. I can go and there was kind of come and the ring like a approaching kind of come at you three-dimensionally somehow, or maybe through successive scenes. The castle you're approaching gets closer and closer as the landscape evolves.
这几个全没看过。Abstract color studies.
I just like looking at these because it's the beginning. Everything is unformed. It's like the kind of first impulses, first ideas before they've taken shape.
Is this how your process goes typically?
I don't know about typically. I feel like it's been different each time, but I feel like this might have been my impulse to start this way on Braid. I mean, I was more immersed in painting at the time, painting as like a way of approaching not just talking about physical materials, but painting distinguished from drawing, like drawing being more about line and painting being more about like color shapes and like adjacency of color areas and stuff. Yeah, I was trying to get feelings out of the color. I can really see it in the green one, the green with the white and the teal and the pink above. That really feels like World 2 to me. It's clearly like green being like a natural landscape, spring-like, beginning, fresh, the blue and the pink, bright and kind of childlike, and the light back there kind of encouraging and like beckoning and a warm and kind of safe feeling.
And then 3, is this more of the dark concept?
Yeah, well, I think it has a darkness to it. I don't know, I see like intense blue on that dark column. I mean, they're more representational things emerging. It's clearly a tree and bushes, but I don't know if that column is like a very large tree or something else, but it definitely has like a powerful thrust to it. It's dense, it's kind of rich, and then behind it a contrasting gentleness and kind of playful light colors, motion, surprise, a little bit of magic coming into play. And then the fourth one, which is a black background with a kind of stone wall. I mean, there's stronger representational element with the stone, but definitely it feels colder. It feels quieter. It feels more distant. These shapes are kind of sitting in some kind of balance. It's not as reassuring, I would say. Actually, this looks like a Zelda scene to me. It looks like a wooded area in Zelda 1 where there are a couple trees and you can like go north to the fairy fountain. It's very likely I was thinking about that just because that's like very important to me. But I don't know. I guess the choice, I see like paths if I'm thinking that way. Different paths you can take, and there are 2 squares, so is that duality? I don't know if it's coming across very strongly, but I don't know. This is actually kind of a playful and fun atmosphere. It's not doesn't remind me a lot of the World 5 that's in the game, but I like how the white figure standing out against the color background with fairly subtle distinctions. They're all kind of close in value, but you have these hue shifts that are subtle. I mean, I worked a lot then with like just shifting hue around experimentally to see what would happen. I do have a kind of distant feeling here. These trees standing on their little islands, the oppressive, encroaching storm clouds, the trees being vivid, bright, self-contained in their roundness and like clustering together self-protectively. Maybe they're comfortable together but won't mix. I'm not sure. Yeah, I do feel an apprehensive feeling about this a little bit.
I feel a slowness having to go from one platform to the other.
Yeah.
It's a skew, which is very interesting.
Ooh.
It is a skew. It's all diagonals, and they're intersecting at this point that looks like kind of a crash, like an impact point. High contrast, black and white, things thrown to their opposites, and these kind of like bits of pink and orange jumping out in the crevices there where the fields are meeting. I don't know, feels like a hot friction or sparks or something. Definitely some kind of sharp impact.
哦，对对对 ，abstract color studies， 就很抽象。我操，就给你看这么一幅图，请问你看到了什么？或者结合这幅图设想一个背景，讲一段小故事。啊，这个对于普通人来说纯粹就是练想象力的，但对于画师 artist 来说，你还是能培养一些东西的。因为艺术需要创作，创作就是需要想象力的。天马行空、乱七八糟想反而是好事儿。Initial approach.
I think what's interesting is how the character of the game took form, and definitely I can talk about my intentions and what I was thinking and happy accidents and so on.
Happy
But
accidents.
I'm also aware of how I joined a process that was already flowing and took influence, and I think that's kind of cool.
那个
That's
是
kind of
boss。
how things really come together. I don't know how to describe it. It's actually kind of hard to describe accurately. I was thinking about the artwork that was there before I joined the project, which was a kind of very incomplete, but some parts of the game had this storybook illustration style focused on like a forest environment. A lot of the trees and other things were really out of scale. They were like really big, and Tim was like really small within the environment. That original art wasn't super clear about what was solid ground and what was decorative, and there were kind of gaps and spaces between the trees, for example, that might have implied you could go over here, but you really couldn't.
OK，
So what I tried to do was not that. I tried to really make it clear what was the play space
背景会误导。
and what was a solid thing or an inaccessible thing, not just because that's better for, comprehension and puzzle solving, but because you can mislead and create kind of confused feeling if the player looks at the screen and thinks, can I get up there, and then has to go through a mental process of realizing that's only because the artist left it blank or that's only decorative. I think there's like a dissonance between the game and the presentation that just feels kind of disappointing on some level.
On some level， 这个全部能展示出来吗？哦，所以它给你一个这放大的功能是吗？看一下，嚯，这不是那颗星星吗？啊，所以顶上那朵云早就已经设计出来，但还是有区别。啊，当时这关这么高的是吧？啊，当时这关居然这么高。拼图那个地方还需要一把钥匙。哦。哎，那现在是如果按他这么设计的话，其实什么意思啊？这个地方你爬上去的时候就已经能看到左上角是有一个空间了，这样反而好解了。他这么设计的话，也许你一周目就能知道这里有什么东西。现在的设计的话，是一周目你根本就没法知道。好深，这关子原来设计的好深呢，而且最后的城堡居然这样的，装在一个这个沙漏里面。这关是可能是第一关有兔子的是吗？啊，非常长啊，相当长。这个深坑还算有点影响，这里不用打开来看了。这边应该是分成了，哦，这就是 boss 关，但第一部分顶上没有照出来，所以感觉像在室外，其实就是内关，就是内关。好，結構多いな。哎，这关当时是兔子是吧？顶上的这居然是兔子，现在是改掉了，而且这边也不太一样，这边对，这边区别还是挺大的。这个设计可以讲有很大区别，这好像都没有这个绿色的平台。啊，这个是那个相当操蛋的关。但区别也是有一些，还是有一些。这个就是 initial design 是吧？非常早期的这个设计，区别还是有的。这个是相当的 AV 画质，就这样。哎，一开始这么设计的嘛？你这么设计的话，如果你没法在时间线内搞定的话，你连关都通不了了。对，他这个好像确实哪期说过的，最早的设计是你必须要拿到拼图才能通关。Early concepts.
These are some early concepts I did, probably some of the earliest things I worked on before I was too deeply involved in
Too
any
deeply
specific
involved.
world or had created any usable assets yet. They're kind of a direct extension from the hiring test that I'd done.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this doesn't look like anything exactly that's in the game, I can tell which worlds these are related to, and I'm sure I was already taking some direction from John and aware of what kinds of environments would be present.
Okay.
The large figure in the background, it looks like a kind of topiary garden thing, and it's backlit, and there's the clouds above. Already I can tell this is World 1. This is
啊，
the
这
end of
这
the
是
game.
World One。
There's no topiary stuff like that, no figures, but there are these trees trimmed into very inorganic shapes, circles and things, and a backlighting that creates, to me, it just has a mysterious feeling,
这
or
个居然
like
是 World One
a。sense of something emerging. It could be the sunrise, it could be like the truth or some realization approaching you, something like that. But yeah, there was going to be an area late in the game that was very cultivated, had a sense of artificiality and some uncomfortable truth pushing through from behind. This one that's like a ruin with an orange tint clearly is related to World 4, which in the final game is a ruin with like an orange foreground. There were different color variations on this. I didn't include everything, but I used this one because it has a really bright, saturated background. I don't love it, but it does indicate the brightness that I would go for in a lot of cases, really saturated colors and like pushing the add blend mode to create bright light and bright colors. And then this last one has a kind of like pastoral feel, or like a village out in the hillside. Definitely feels like World 2 with the muscular rocks in the foreground and a sense of vitality, but also hopefulness and like gentleness in the hills. And there again are these like free floating kind of dabs of color that would carry into the final game.
看这期应该打到什么地方结束了？这就3章，就保证下期差不多能搞定，就怕下期你这搞不定，然后时间拖得很长，就很没意思。顶上看过了，所以这里分成5个区，再加从这儿过去。The puzzles 这里应该不长了嘛？它这边虽然看起来不长，但都是新的东西，所以这个就让人很害怕，你不知道时间的，未知是很可怕的东西，所以可以稍微再往前打一打。这里应该不用进太长嘛 ，World 2啊，就直接这样了是吗？
Where are you chronologically?
这是看过的。
To the like which is no that sim like it's the everything more love script that are feeling of course and as well game there these atoms and everything. It's hanging a chamber made up of this tree. But anyway, it's got an interesting character of its own, but my new stuff is sitting with it and very discordantly, but I guess the game looked like this at one point.
Looked like this at one point。这个区还有别的东西吗？这看过的。那一个 Word 如果像这样的话呢，下期应该是能搞定。确认一下。接下来 second wave of concept World 3啊，这个是 second wave of concept。
So it was time to
好长。
back up and make sure we had a handle on how we were going to manage this progression, this tonal
把这部
progression
分打
from
完。
World 2 all the way through to World 6 and then World 1 after that. So I actually stepped back and did concepts for everything, just to make sure that we had a sense of variety and progression. So there's different color palette in each world. They would all defer sufficiently to each other and feel unique and interesting when you arrive in them, and there'd be some progression and contrast and surprise. This wide one is interesting to me. I'm playing with more than one idea. I can see the rocks and the grass that look like the World 3 forest as it would eventually come to being, and the wood elements there that look like simple structures, like we're just getting the beginning of human development. These are just like nailed together boards, not too refined. But then on the right side, there's this weird mushroom landscape. I don't even know. I think this was just like never followed up on, but it could resemble World 4, which has mountains in the distance and has an orange palette overall. It has a curly smoke coming out of a pipe or something, which there are curly clouds in World 4, but it doesn't really quite look like anything. There are two here that are quite similar. You can see a progression. I kind of wanted to give enough of a sense that like things take various forms or look very crude initially. Yeah, this is just developing the same canvas and seeing where the colors go. This becomes World 3. The palette in the background, the yellow, the large rocks, and then in the foreground, I can see I was trying a kind of teal initially. I tend to avoid obvious colors sometimes, resist just using a bright green, but no, it felt really nice. So that's the right tone here. There's some emerald in there. There's some red and brown giving a nice contrast. And there is that density of weird plants and variety that I'm coming up with here to achieve that idea of a progression into a little bit of a claustrophobic feeling, but it's much more friendly overall. It's not a spooky forest anymore. This is a rarity. I didn't do a lot of concept art in this style. I like doing it, but John pointed out that from here we have to translate all of this to a side scroller, so a lot is lost in that translation. It's not necessarily worth all the time spent on something like this, but I did enjoy developing this atmosphere. I do like drawing tunnels and pathways going off in different directions that your eye can follow. And here Tim is dressed really inappropriately, delving deep into the forest and discovering the lair of the, I don't know what he's called, but he's the boss creature who's sleeping
那就叫他 boss.
in his underground chamber. I think the monster has a sympathetic aspect. I don't feel too good about the harm Tim's causing him. He has really strong human legs. This is recognizably the lair of the boss you fight. This scene I actually developed all in one piece. It has like really excessive number of unique elements. There were tons of wood beams that came out of this, and I remember John said we don't need to go this far in most cases. There's some differences from the final in terms of like the exact contour of the ground and other details, but this just shows that in progress. The chandelier figures into that boss fight. Did a few versions, what it ought to look like. The first thing I noticed here actually is there's a version of the chandelier that's teal that has electrical bulbs. It's funny because in the remaster we made it teal, whereas in the original we went with brown, which was not a great idea because the trellis behind it is brown, so it doesn't stand out very well. I also like looking at the clasp that holds the chandelier up. That's the thing you touch. That's like the touch target, the hitbox that releases the chandelier. So I was trying to draw attention to that. It's actually pretty subtle in the game. It's a really small thing that you can find. But I did do a version where it was much larger, colorful, and this interesting one that's two hands holding onto each other, which is pretty on the nose, trying to take these game mechanics and give them a kind of human interpersonal resonance, some feeling of loss or whatever. Here's just another piece of concept art, unfinished, developing the atmosphere, the feeling of running through the rain, which happens in World 3. I guess I like this image of Tim within a large environment, driven forward by whatever.
It looks like fan art of Braid.
How do you mean?
That's not quite your Tim. It's a sketchy
Sketchy
Tim. It's
Tim.
something that, to me, looks more like a finished piece for viewing and not like a concept of something that's in the game. Like, I understand he runs through rain, but he doesn't react differently when there's rain. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
the gameplay doesn't change when there's rain. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I
Yeah.
guess the splash on the ground is representative of something that the game did. But other than that, I don't know that this is really, like, something that translated into the game.
That's true. It has a funny friction with the actual game because he doesn't shield his face or cover his face from the rain, and in a way it feels separate and apart because this doesn't exactly happen. But I guess I was just trying to think of how to support this feeling with what I had to work with, which was, you know, the look of the rain itself, the splashing when you step in it, and the although we didn't have footfall splashes in the original, we do in the new version. But yeah, like the big rocks, the big foresty elements surrounding him with the darkness suggested behind them. It's like a small guy in a big area. We have a couple screenshots of the game in development, and I just think it's cool to see how weird it looks as we're starting to throw in the new assets. It doesn't have particle effects, not counting the fire, but various things that would complete the look are just not present yet. You know, all the old sprites that don't really match the new aesthetic. So it's cool. I mean, when you're making things, they kind of look like hell for a long time.
这 second wave of concepts 这右边乍一看有点像什么武侠小说这世界观的感觉。最后怎么有个这个？就这样，然后把这里面 World 3这没看过吗 ？Face 还能往下走。这个不是 World 4了吗？啊，这个确实 World 4啊，那看来 World 3就这个东西没，那别看了。这没看过的话，我怕它很长。就每个 World 的 concept art 现在给你看一下，这期已经差不多了。下期还有这个吗？7是没有的，所以也就是一个这个是3对吧？3、4、5、6了，3、4、5、6加一个内段，还是比较直接的。每个房间进去是对应的世界的一个这个 concept art， 像这个4看来是看过的，4、5、6可能都看过，还有这个什么，这像 speed run。The puzzles， 你明明标了一个 speed run 的标记，就这样，就先这样。然后要进来的话，要先从这儿走，那片屏幕先不要屏 ，Visual Gallery 才能进到那个区域。OK， 这几期都没有打这个普通关卡，都在看一些有的没的 Visual Art。就感觉到时候下一期这个第3次的 speed run 不是下期吧？下一期如果能看的话，下期第3次 speed run 感觉要吃瘪，这4分钟不好进，一个大失误就只能重来了。就先这样，因为我不想再搞个第4次。